Welcome, everyone, to the Voice of Meaning. Today, I have the privilege to dialogue with Dr. Edward Marshall. Dr. Marshall is the director of the Ottawa Institute of Logotherapy. He's a research psychologist. He's a trained physician and psychiatrist. He's also a professor of logotherapy with the Graduate Institute of Theology. And he and his wife, Maria, have published many books. One of the later books being a textbook on logotherapy that I find quite comprehensive. And it's a privilege to have him here today. So Dr. Marshall, or may I call you Edward?
Yes, you can call me Edward.
Okay.
Thank you for having me here today.
You're welcome. Tell us a little bit about how you came to who you are and what you do and the meaning that you find in your career and your story. It's very interesting. And also how you met Maria, who we interviewed just a couple weeks ago.
Yes, I'm originally from Spain, specifically from a place called the Canary Islands, which are Spanish territory. And I grew up there. Then I went to medical school in the north of Spain, in Pamplona. It's Navarra in Spain. And actually it's there where I first learned about logotherapy. Because there was a professor who lived in Vienna and would come to offer lectures in the college, and his name was Reverend Dr. John Battista Torillo, and it happened that he became very good friend of Viktor Frankl in the 1960s, and this Reverend, he was a psychiatrist and also minister of religion. And he was talking about logotherapy and how we met Viktor Frankl. That university also invited Viktor Frankl in 1968 to give a presentation. So many of the professors at the medical school actually knew Viktor Frankl, and their publishing house, the university publishing house, actually published some of Viktor Frankl's books. So that's how I got to know Viktor Frankl and logotherapy in the 1980s. But then once after I graduated, I wasn't sure how to apply logotherapy and existential analysis. It was more like a philosophy. And I practiced family medicine for a number of years. Then I did my PhD with neuroscience in the medical school. That was already back in the Canary Islands. And then after that, I decided to go to the United Kingdom to learn psychiatry. So I went to the University of Leeds. And there as well, there were some professors who were quite humanistic and concerned with the spirituality issues. But it was not only until I graduated actually from the University of Leeds with a diploma, postgraduate diploma in psychiatry, that I encountered the limitations of psychiatry in working with patients. So it was in my first job after graduation from Leeds that I started to look at logotherapy. I remember logotherapy and say, okay, so how can we apply logotherapy for people who are not really improving from traditional methods of psychotherapy, say psychoanalysis or cognitive behavioral therapy or medication. Okay? So there is where I started to really explore more the application of logotherapy. And that's is going now to the year 2001, and that's when I met Dr. Maria Marshall in England, and then she was offering lectures at the university where I was working, and then we met, and then we started to collaborate in terms of the application of logotherapy and existential analysis in clinical practice. Okay, so that was a little bit the introduction, and then from there I continue the diplomate clinician education offered in the United States by the Institute of Logotherapy in the United States, and I completed that in 2010. And from then on, I've been teaching logotherapy and existential analysis and offering professional development courses. And I must say that even in 2010, there was something extraordinary that a lot of researchers and clinicians that they didn't even have a first-hand connection with Viktor Frankl started to study the question of meaning and the importance of meaning in life, for well-being, for mental health. And a lot of empirical research has been done since then. So that led us, Maria and I, to write with all these advances that were coming up in the literature and our own experiences. And out of about 12 years of research and studies came out this book, the Viktor Frankl's Logotherapy Analysis, Theory and Practice, that to our surprise became a volume, a textbook. And if you look at the literature in logotherapy analysis, are more like pocket books. So that was a surprise that we came out with a textbook after all those years. And why is a textbook? Because we incorporate the fundamentals, the philosophy, the pillars, the logotherapy and analysis with all these other evidence-based research, and we try to bring together not just literature from the logotherapy world, but also literature outside the logotherapy world that have studied the question of meaning in life for well-being and promoting health. Okay, so out of that, it has been the evolution to the person I have become today, but of course one keeps evolving. So that answers your question, Neil, or you have any further?
Well, I'm curious always about the human side. You met your wife after starting to study logotherapy, and then she just appeared in Leeds, or
no.
did you go to one of
it
her?
was in Portsmouth. I say in Leeds where I studied, and then in Portsmouth was when there was my first job as a staff psychiatrist.
I see.
And then when we met, we started to talk about Viktor Frankl, and she mentioned the Doctor and the Soul, and that's how we started to connect with each other. Exactly. And then she had a different background. She came from a totally different country. We have met Viktor Frankl and his family from different channels. So we both put together our own experiences, in different, coming from different worlds to coalesce. It was a little bit like a serendipity or some kind of synchronicity connection.
Right. Would it be fair to say that Viktor Frankl was your matchmaker?
Well, I would say that first we met, we liked each other, and then Viktor Frankl was something of the things that we had in common. There are many things that we share, many values and many things, but Viktor Frankl was one of them, an important one of them. Yeah.
Okay, so you met, fell in love, married, and then had 5 wonderful boys. What were your thoughts with Maria about how you would raise them, knowing everything you know about Viktor Frankl's philosophy and logotherapy?
Well, first of all, is to apply the philosophy that will be a values-based education. So we have been researching on that area, like many other authors, what that means. Then the question of universal values, how as a humanity we are searching for truth. Then all the area of freedom and responsibility, to teach them in terms of being responsible adults, so being attentive to what's happening around them, and also how they are going to respond to the challenges in their lives and in the world in general. These have issues in terms of leadership, how they can learn to be themselves, to conform to the mass, or to having this kind of herd mentality. Okay, all these aspects have helped us to raise them. That they don't have challenges or they don't have difficulties like everybody else. Yes, they do. But then we teach them, okay, so how we can respond to those challenges and to those difficulties as they arise. And then for that, we need to be examples of leading that way, and to acknowledge, the imperfections. The one thing is the theory, but the other thing is the practice. So all those things have contributed to raise them up, and it's an ongoing process. It's an ongoing process, and and also for Maria and I, how the experience of parenthood has also helped us to be better therapists, because not just the one reads about child psychology, but also one actually needs to live it, to live it. And that goes very well into terms of the logotherapy approach. When we look at about the logotherapy lived, that's what that means is that Viktor Frankl, for the people who are new to the topic, he wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning, and that was an autobiographical book. And that autobiography was not based just on facts that happened to him during Second World War. He was a Holocaust survivor, but also how he responded, how he lived his values, how he remained compassionate, kind, and loving in the midst of suffering. Okay, so that replication into one's own life and the one's own one family, one can, live it. So we have this term logotherapy lived. We need to live logotherapy, not just know about logotherapy.
Okay. In your book, which I haven't read the entire book yet, but I've read quite a bit, you talk about, and I find that your definition of logotherapy, because most people think, what's that, was very good. Can you summarize what you and Maria said, what the definition of logotherapy is?
Mm-hmm. Yes, so it's based all on Viktor Frankl's books. There are about 10 Viktor Frankl's books translated into English. There are many others that have not been translated. They are in different languages, and the first language is German. So what we try to do always is to understand Viktor Frankl, the context. So we talk about the life of Viktor Frankl and his times. And then from there, say, okay, so we have logotherapy and existential analysis. Okay, so what that means? No? So we have logos, means reason, meaning, the word, therapy. It's a therapy through meaning. Okay, then the thing is how we can combine that with reason. That is to bring to reason, the people's lives. How they can understand their emotions, they can understand their values, how they can understand their responses. So it makes sense at the end. Okay, so. And then we have the part that is logotherapy of an existential analysis. Frankl talks about existential analysis, and it's quite well defined in his book, The Doctor and the Soul, analysis of responsibility. So it's about an analysis of the possibilities of the person. Okay, so something happens to me. Okay, so what is it possible now? A lot of things perhaps have been taken away, or things that were there available, they are no longer available. People might feel a little bit lost, but okay, so how can we analyze that life in the sense, okay, so there is still a freedom to respond, and that will be the existential analysis of freedom and responsibility and possibilities. And then once we have that conceptualized or figure out, and say, okay, so how we can act on those possibilities, and that's where the logotherapy comes in. So he says, okay, so within reason, how we can act, because otherwise it just becomes an ideal. And that's another thing that is important about logotherapy. For instance, if we compare it with the psychoanalysis, that psychoanalysis is left as awareness or insight. Okay, so once I get an understanding, then everything falls, together. No? But logotherapy goes a little bit beyond that and say, okay, so now that we know these possibilities, okay, so now how we put them in practice, how we bridge that gap between what is possible and how we are going to act. And then through that process is how a person finds a meaning in life, is through living those values and those ideals. Okay, so that's how even in situations of suffering, a person can remain kind, compassionate, loving, and find meaning in their lives. So that's a process that doesn't become natural. It doesn't come natural to people. Some people more than others, depending on their background, education, context. But it's something that can be helped to achieve. So and we know that within any human being, there's that possibility to achieve those values lived and the possibility to find meaning in life. So that will be a little bit the definition that we bring in our textbook. Okay, and based on Viktor Frankl.
Thank you. I think chapter 5 talks about the 3 pillars of logotherapy, and I remember Frankl wrote about it quite a bit. Can you elaborate a little bit about these 3 pillars?
Yes, absolutely. And that's one of the things that makes the logotherapy and existential analysis unique, because these 3 pillars is going to give us an understanding of the human being as a whole. Because we have the freedom of will. The human beings have freedom of will. They have a experience of being free to make decisions in their lives. When we take that experience away from a human being, they become despaired. They don't know what to do. They feel control. So that's detrimental for their own physical and mental health. It increases levels of stress. Right. So that's the first thing, that there is a freedom of will, and that freedom of will resides in the human spirit. Okay. So there's not just body, mind, but also a spirit that is free. Then we have the issue of the motivation, how there is a will to meaning. So how people they have within themselves a motivation to find meaning in life, to live values. So the fact that we have values, that we have aspirations, ideals, any human being have innate in themselves that motivation to live those values and to find a meaning. Viktor Frankl calls the will to meaning, to differentiate it from the will to power of Adler or the will to pleasure of Freud. And then the third pillar is about the meaning in life, that I already touched on it, that under any circumstances there is a potentiality, or the possibility to find meaning. And that's not because we will be able to solve a problem or cure a disease or make things better. It is because we can live those values in any circumstances. So perhaps we are going to live them differently than in the past, but that exploration of the possibilities of living values, and I insist again, because for Viktor Frankl was important the value of love and kindness and reaching out to others. That possibility is always there. And that's brings as well an important thing that for the viewers is the difference between Carl Jung's approach. He was a Swiss psychiatrist, very famous disciple of Freud, who also talked about spirituality and the meaning in life, and Viktor Frankl's approach. Okay, so it was a difference. And through research and reading both authors, a conclusion that I have been sharing with others is, well, and it's quite plausible, is that for Carl Jung, there was a lot about integration of the self. You know, that we have our parts and the parts that we are not so proud of. Okay, so and how we can integrate, acknowledge, and accept ourselves as we are, and trying to do our best. You know, this issue of the self-improvement. But then within the Carl Jung's approach, it stays there in the individual, the same as we were saying Freud, just get an insight. Whereas Viktor Frankl emphasized a lot what is called, he calls self-transcendence, is the integration of the self with the external world. It can be nature, other people, culture, you know, you name it. You know? So that integration of the person with the self is very important in Viktor Frankl's approach, and in Viktor Frankl's understanding of these three pillars, that we have the freedom always to think about others, not just ourselves, that we have the possibility to find meaning in doing something for somebody. Okay, so, and then we have that possibility always there's some possibility, because there are people always around us. So, and not just us, but it can be the environment, or it can be nature, or can be science or culture. You know, there are many ways that the person is not just the person, the self-improvement, but also can reach or self-transcend others. So this will be a little bit of the summary of the three pillars. And the good thing about our textbook is that we give a lot of references and a lot of additional resources to better understand what I'm talking. Okay.
I'm aware of that. I'm going to ask you more technical questions about how you constructed the book later. You spoke about responsibility, you know, when you were talking about raising your sons, and a couple other times. How does responsibility fit in to these three pillars?
Okay, so we have the freedom of will. Okay, so we are free to make decisions in life. Therefore, we are responsible, and not all the decisions are equal in life. And then when we are talking about meaning, not everything that is purposeful is meaningful, in saying that first, it needs to be free, it needs to be a free response to be meaningful. And second, not all values are equal. There is a hierarchy of value that comes from the different philosophies even before Frankl, is that there are universal values, and there are also cultural and personal values. And then sometimes it's difficult to differentiate, okay, what are the universal values, what is better for the common good. Okay, all right, so the responsibility is that not all the decisions are the same. You know, all no decisions are equal. So there's a responsibility to decide well, and what that means for each individual is going to be subjective, but then at the same time, there is an objectivity of meaning. Viktor Frankl talks about the subjectivity of the person as a subject, but the objectivity of meaning in the outside the person. Okay, so that's what it means, the responsibility, the ability to respond and to discern what is the best response in that particular situation.
Okay. One of my favorite quotes of Dr. Frankl is, he said that psychoanalysts and psychiatrists are referred to as shrinks, but many people referred to Viktor Frankl as stretch. Can you give me an example of how you would stretch a patient rather than just analyze them?
Okay, so all right, so let's go back to Viktor Frankl, because that's response could have many different variations. But okay, so from the point of view of Franklian psychology, okay, all right. So what it is that Viktor Frankl recognized three dimensions of the person: the body, the mind, and the spirit. Okay, so the body has a homeostasis. You know, we have vital signs that we need to maintain: temperature, heart rate, all kind of hormonal balances in the body. Okay, that's the body. Then we have the mind, that is the psychology part, where we have emotions and we have thoughts. And with Freud and other, and even Adler, analyze a lot what are the defense mechanisms, what are the impulses, what are the different conditions of that mind. Okay, so people tend to think negatively, or people tend to be self-centered. Okay, so there are all these tendencies and impulses and conditions, behavioralism, the conditioning response. All that is in the mind and the body. Now, Viktor Frankl talks about the dimension of the spirit where we have this freedom of will, and then the capacities to distance from ourselves and the capacity to transcend to others. Okay, so if we ignore the spiritual dimension, we shrink the person.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas we incorporate the spiritual dimension in psychotherapy or even in coaching, we stretch the person. Okay. Right. Okay. And then Viktor Frankl talks within the spiritual dimension, what we call the no dynamics or spiritual dynamics, where he's saying, well, the same as it's not the same as in the body, that the homeostasis in the psychology, peace of mind. Actually, in the spiritual dimension, there is a tension between where we are to where we would like to be. So there is where we set up goals and aspirations, where we identify, okay, so how we can become the best person, the best version of ourselves. That's in the spiritual dimension. So as we start to study the spiritual dimension and to acknowledge it as part of the human being, we are helping them to stretch beyond, rather than to shrink to the body and the mind.
Very good definition. I know it would be the subject of more interviews, but the concept of spirit, how do you work with patients and clients who claim to have no religion, do not believe in religion, think it's all a lot of fantasy? Can you still help them with logotherapy, and how?
Well, first of all, in general practice, some people don't know anything about logotherapy when they come to see me. No? Okay. Now, even though we are talking about all these words explicitly because that's the theory and the education of logotherapy, a person who has studied logotherapy can still see the human person as having body, mind, and spirit, independent of the beliefs of the other person. Okay, so one can still talk about aspirations, one can still talk about ideals, one can still talk about the capacity to decide, the capacity to consent, the options people have. All that doesn't necessarily be conceptualized as a spiritual dimension. But the truth is that within psychology and within neuroscience, all those abstract concepts are seen as a domain of philosophy. Okay, all right. So, but then without them, it's important to help people, especially when they are in very in crisis situations or in very extreme situations, to help people to regain strength or to regain hope. Okay, so one can talk about all this in words and in terms that are more general and more acceptable to each client's culture. And what is surprising is that the people who don't want to have anything to do with religion, spirituality, those are a very small proportion of the population. Okay, so that's what's surprising.
That is surprising, but I think I would define that as the ability to self-distance, to look at your own life as like you're watching a movie. Well, who's watching the movie? And maybe that's the spiritual dimension.
Yes, absolutely. That's what I'm saying. It's a philosophy. It's a philosophy. But then when we look at the philosophy and abstract concepts, like for instance, the concept of love, science cannot explain it because science can say, well, there's an attachment or there are these factors, but it's not fully understood by science how people get together or how people get involved in particular poses. So all that there is a little bit of element that goes beyond the science, and that's what I'm saying at the beginning of the talk. That once we know what science can offer, we start to see their limitations.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Right. And then, of course, I think it was Frankl that coined the phrase, the defiant power of the human spirit.
Yes.
How can you help people to harness that in order to help their crises and whatever?
Exactly. Yeah, so the first thing is from the point of view of the therapist to understand it and to acknowledge that everybody has that, the same as we have other abilities, you know. Everybody has the ability of the defiant power of the human spirit. Okay, so and then the people who are rebellious, who are, going, against or trying to defend something, they are all showing that defiant power of the human spirit. So it's a little bit transformed that energy into something meaningful. Okay, so there is a defiant power of the human spirit, but that if it's not educated, if it's not reflected upon, perhaps people start to get involved in the wrong direction. Okay? That is going to lead towards more negativity or more conflict rather than growth and harmony and community building.
Yeah, often when I'd have conversations with my wife, who's my conscience as well, she might say, if I'm eating too much, that, Freud's winning, your will to pleasure is more important than your will to meaning. But then at least I can use my defiant power of human spirit to stop eating too much and defy that desire for more pleasure, another piece of cake or whatever.
Yes, yes. Yeah, and
I,
there's where it comes the intersection between logotherapy, existential analysis, and well-being. Is that when we start to use all this methodology to help people live healthier lives, people to achieve more longevity, or people to have the optimal sense of well-being, to look after themselves, to use science, to use medicine, and any ways to remain healthy, but remain healthy for a reason, for a cause. It's not just for the sake of the self. That's the thing. Is that when
mm-hmm.
it's for the sake of others, then it becomes one is more motivated to go through the struggle of the treatment or the struggle of the intervention, because before one gets better, perhaps sometimes one needs to go through a struggle. Okay, so that's what they have shown, for instance, in people who suffer from cancer, that yes, there's cure to cancer, but the treatment still is a difficult treatment to go through that, and it's a journey. So therapy and analysis actually has been proven to be very effective in helping people through the journey of cancer treatment, for instance. Or even when there's a terminal illness, when cure is not possible, that's one of the points of Viktor Frankl's what he called medical ministries, that to keep helping that person to alleviate their suffering and to find meaning in their last days of life. Okay, so that's where all this heading is towards first mental and physical health, quality of life, well-being, and this has been expanded to education, to the business management, the meaning of work, but it started as Viktor Frankl being a physician, a medical doctor. Okay, so that's what it started, and then expanded to other areas.
Okay. The book says that it's a textbook for therapists, psychotherapists. In my opinion, maybe it could be a textbook for more. You and Maria recently wrote a book about helping professionals, and I work with people and their money. I'm a helping professional as well, and I encounter, as my clients get older and older, and I get older and older, more crises in people's lives. I feel it helps me as well, even though I'm not psychoanalyzing them or I'm
Yes, yes,
not their psychologist.
yes, yes,
Would you recommend the book for other, like, social workers and people whose jobs are to help other people and not just to be psychologists.
Yes. Yes. So that's an area. Yes, as I said, logotherapy essential analysis can be applied in many areas. The thing is that we need to be careful as authors that people have the adequate training and education in psychotherapy when they apply some of the tools and interventions that we explain in the course, because otherwise it can, if it's not applied well, it can become risky, So because with everything there are benefits and there are risks, and we want to minimize the risks by making sure that the people who are going to apply these techniques have the proper education. Now, for teachers, for coaches, business consultants, yes, they can read the book and be conscientious that, okay, so what is my scope of practice and what is beyond my scope of practice? So it's like reading a book on psychiatry. Everybody can get something out of it, but that doesn't mean that now I can practice psychiatry. Okay, so that's one thing, and then also is because we have other books that are dedicated to other professionals that they perhaps not so condensed as this one. And there is a challenge within the logotherapy and existential analysis world is to educate health professionals in logotherapy and existential analysis, because normally no part of the curriculum of many universities and programs, and also if it is, perhaps they go back to the older literature rather than looking at the evidence-based literature that has recently been written, and perhaps people don't make the connection. Okay, so yeah, so as a psychotherapist, yes, our main audience was to say, okay, so how we can bring logotherapy and existential analysis to the mainstream of psychology and psychiatry. Okay, so and that's one of the things that is the aim of the book. But of course, is anybody who is in the helping professions can benefit from learning these tools and techniques. And actually, we have a professional development course where we use this textbook that is open to people who are professionals and might find it useful to apply logotherapy analysis. And in that course, we offer tutoring sessions. There are 10 modules, and we offer 30 minutes tutoring sessions where we tailor the content to the needs of that particular student. It's only individual tutoring that we are offering, and with that purpose to say, okay, so in your area, how you can apply these tools and techniques safely. Okay, and if you feel unsafe, don't do it. So that's where it comes from. This thing of how we can present all this knowledge and research in a responsible way. Yeah.
So are these classes offered through the Ottawa Institute, or where are they? Oh, yeah.
Yes. So the Ottawa Institute of Logotherapy we offer is a very short course, and it's a professional development course, and we try to screen students who are already professionals, that they have in psychology, so not to make them believe that they take this little course and then they are already a counselor.
No, that's true. And in my profession, there are a lot of licenses that we have to pass, as with medicine, as with psychology. But a broad awareness that meaning in life is important, I believe, is very important. And I will put link to the Ottawa Institute. There is a wealth of information, even without taking the classes, that are in the Institute's website. And a little bit, I've read a lot of your books. You and Maria are writing almost one per year on the average.
Yeah, and sometimes even two.
Yeah, they're very well referenced. And for instance, I immediately went to the chapter, a couple pages about music, because my wife's a professional musician, and she actually 10 years ago took your class through the Viktor Frankl Institute and read it, and there were many references to interesting articles about music and meaning. So when you and Maria are writing a book like this, how do you work together? How do you are able to do all this research and still have your day jobs and raise 5 boys. And I'm astounded. What's your secret?
Well, first of all, is that we try to the electronic communications, having electronic databases and the internet have facilitated our work. Without that, we would have not been able to do it. Yes, we are affiliated to the Graduate Theological Foundation in the United States for the past couple of years, but before we didn't have really a permanent affiliation. I was a part-time professor at St. Paul University here in Ottawa, but we didn't really have without the electronic means, it would have not been possible. Okay, so how we do it first is that we are reading through Google Alerts anything that comes up in terms of different keywords. So we read every day articles, or at least the headings, and then we select the ones that look interesting, and then we put that in a database, in our own database of articles. Second, as we are interacting with people, especially through social media, with different crises that are happening in the world, different topics, for instance, the physicians burnout, everything that happened through the pandemic. All those are topics that we start to see how logotherapy and disease analysis can be of help. Okay? Right, so responding to the social or world events. And then we have 2 books that we were editors, where we got logotherapists from around the world to write about a specific topic. For instance, self-care during the COVID-19 pandemic. So we edited that book. We had another one about recipes and meaning, when responding to the crisis of hunger in the world. Okay, so we have done about trust, developing trust in the world. In the world, there is very little trust among nations, among people. Okay, so how we can develop trust? So we edited, I think it was last year, a book, or the year before, a book on basic trust, and this is something. For instance, one of the main disciples of Viktor Frankl, Elisabeth Lukas, she offered an interview in German about basic trust. So Maria has the ability to translate, so that has helped us. Between the 2 of us, we can manage about 7 to 8 languages. So we have that capacity to translate, and again, with electronic means of translation, that has been also a big help. And then we build it slowly. So it's a meaningful, and it's part of our job. We want to be clinicians, but also want researchers and educators. And the 3 things, they combine together, to do research and education without a clinical practice. We found that when we can still detach from the reality of the world, no? So, but to see people day in, day out who are struggling and who have real issues, help us to reflect on the ideals and the theories. So that's how we have been building it up, and also slowly to have some kind of idea or intuition, and to connect with people, and to keep going even when one feels that nobody's listening. But we keep
right. keep going. That
the same as Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl had that experience. He came out of the concentration camps. He was in Vienna, wrote The Man's Search for Meaning, published it, and for a long time he felt that nobody cared about what he was talking about. Okay, and then in the 60s there was a more interest, in the 70s, the 80s, and exponentially has been more and more interest. But he also had to go through that journey in the desert.
Yeah. Well, as we had in the interview with Maria, we talked about Man's Search for Meaning. Yes, 20 million people have read this book. It's in many, many languages. But if anyone in the audience has not yet read it, I strongly recommend it. It's very easy to acquire. I think the book saved my life when I read it first back in 1991, and many others will attest to that. And final thought, in my explorations of logotherapy, I find that in Latin America, there are many institutes, and it seems very, very popular in the Spanish speaking world. Do you have any thoughts as to why?
Well, I would say, first of all, Viktor Frankl, the same he was traveling to North America, he was traveling to South America. He perhaps even did more trips to South America than even to North America. I think he traveled to North America like 80, 90 times, and to South America around the same thing. Okay. So for them, it also to build those institutes that they have now and they look very popular was also hardship. They had a lot of indifference, but slowly they have managed to keep the flame alive, and also all the research that has been done and the effectiveness of logotherapy for mental and physical health has helped as well to bring that popularity. Then as well in South America, there is a lot of practice related to philosophy. So that sits very well with the more Latin Latino mentality. That it's not just about technology, what advances health, but also the philosophy of life. That's something that's in the culture. Yeah, and then I say that then the popularity of Viktor Frankl's books, because that's the key. Viktor Frankl's legacy lives in our lives because people are still reading the book. I go to a store, a bookstore. Viktor Frankl is in the bestseller section. Your man search for me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so people read the book and then they say, okay, so now who knows about this? And then they search online, and there are only a handful of people in the world who are actually advertising that they practice it. There are many more professionals who know it, but they don't advertise it. No? Okay, so that's the thing that in Latin America is the same thing. The first book translated from German to another language was in Spanish. It was The Doctor and the Soul, was translated in Mexico in 1950. In English was in 1955.
Oh,
So
that's
so
interesting.
so it started much earlier in South America, the knowledge of Viktor Frankl, and also this kind of philosophy that is related to the Latino culture. So that's important. So there's this kind of connection, between that and that culture and logotherapy. Another important thing is that in Latin America, because of immigration, people knew more German as well, so they are more acquainted with the German books. And actually, we say in English it has been 10 books translated, whereas to Spanish, most of the books have been translated, if not all have been translated. And Elisabeth Lukas books, because they are more German kind of speaking people who emigrated from after the Second World War to South America. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there are different factors. Yeah.
And how can we influence our world leaders and movers and shakers to apply more of Viktor Frankl's concepts, which I strongly believe if we did, our world would be a safer and better place?
Well, this is how I see it, and because when I'm teaching, I have students from all over the world, from different sides of the conflicts in the world. It's more like a grassroots endeavor. What is a human being? What people really want in their lives? It's not just the leaders, but people, what they want. They want safety, to take care of their families, a decent work, housing. That's what the people of the street wants. And when I see people at different sides of the conflict, they want the same thing. Their meaning is the same thing because it's objective. And sometimes we get caught in these other conflicts that are at a higher level that don't make sense. So it's through our work making sense and reasoning, and and exploring different ways where people can make connections. Okay, another thing, for instance, that can bring people together is the social aspect of logotherapy, that is not just about self-improvement, but integrating the self with the environment, how we can make the world a better place. And that's another thing as well that connects well with the social action in not just in South America, but what will be the global South. You know, how people can help each other to make their communities better. Okay, so that it connects very well with the logotherapy and existential analysis that we are saying in South America and South Africa. There is a very important institute of logotherapy and existential analysis because it's about this community building philosophy. You know, it sits very well with communities in developing countries. No? Okay, so I think that's it at a personal level. Viktor Frankl talks about this personal response, you know, to the world. So we have another book called A Personal Response to a Global Concern. You know, Perpetuum Mobile, a personal response to a global concern. Okay, so that's I think the recipe is to how everybody is responding to what's happening around them, and then through that to become more a humanity. Yeah.
That's wonderful. A bit of a commercial. The recipe book is called From Hearth to Heart. It was published in 2017, and I have a story and a recipe in that book.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, called Huckleberry Pie. I'll refer to the book
exactly.
in the comments, and you can Google Edward and Maria, or Maria and Edward Marshall, find descriptions of all their books, and I'm sure one of them or more of them might resonate with you. And I really, really appreciate the time we've spent together and the perspectives you've given us. And again, please help support the Marshalls and buy and read their books and check out the Ottawa Institute of Logotherapy website. Learn more about it. I believe that we will all benefit by a little more thinking and pondering about meaning in life. Do you have any parting words, Dr. Marshall?
Well, parting words, I want to mention again Elisabeth Lukas, because we model our institute a little bit to the institute she already founded in South Germany in the 1980s. You know, because Maria, she was a student of Elisabeth Lukas, and she always encouraged us to keep writing and to keep doing the work we do. You know, even if it's in the background. You know, so that encouragement is in the background, and and it's about that is to everybody to take their own responsibility, and as I said, it's how we can, as people who know logotherapy, how we say, okay, so to have this message is a philosophy, it's also a science, and it's something that can be understood by anybody, independent of their beliefs, of their spirituality or lack of, they can benefit from this methodology, and that's what I want to say today.
Okay. So I read her book, Meaning and Suffering. Would you recommend that book? I found it very, very valuable.
Yes, absolutely. And then Elisabeth Lucas' books, she has a few books that have been re-edited and republished in English, even though she has many other books also in German, and those are very well recommended books to look at. Yeah.
Good. I'll refer to them. Again, thank you, Edward, and for all the time and insights that you have given us.